the number of ways that a patient can manifest their unhappiness is near infinite. And so the key is just being proactive. So if somebody has a problem in general, I wouldn't ignore it.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of the Raving Patients podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Len Tao. First off, as always, I want to thank the sponsors of the podcast. We have Dental Intelligence and the Doc site, so thank you for them for their support. I also wanted to let everybody know that if they haven't purchased their ticket, please go to superchargeyourdentalpractice.com. It's a live event I'm having September 29th and 30th, 2023. It's a business and marketing boot camp where you learn how to run the business side of dentistry and the marketing side of your practice. It's in Delray Beach, Florida, September 29th and 30th, 2023. So check out that at superchargeyourdentalpractice.com. We're going back to the roots and we're talking about reviews today. And I'm really excited to be speaking with an expert on HIPAA and addressing unfavorable patient reviews. We're talking to the founder and CEO of a company called Medical Justice. So today's episode is called Surviving Medico-Legal Mayhem with Dr. Jeffrey Segal. Jeff, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, great to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
So Jeff, for means of introduction, why don't you let everybody know a little bit about your background? It's really interesting. Tell people what you do and how you help business owners.
That's great. So in terms of my origin story, I practiced as a neurosurgeon for a decade. I had a son who became ill. He's better now, but I took a year off to focus on him. And in that window of time, I became convinced that a certain set of pharmaceutical compounds might help him. And so I took a major detour into founding a biotechnology company in Research Triangle Park. And I thought I would do that for a brief period of time. I did it for a longer period of time. And the company was ultimately sold to a medical device company. And then I wondered, well, can I get back into the operating room? It's been 5 years. While I was arrogant enough to believe I could do it, I'm not sure I could reasonably persuade anyone I should do it. So I ended up forming Medical Justice as an entity designed to keep doctors from being sued for frivolous reasons, then more broadly to de-escalate all types of conflicts that doctors have. And believe me, let me count the ways. There are a gazillion of them. And then also got involved in the reputation marketing and management space when reviews were in their infancy. So this is a lot of zigs and zags. At the end of the day, I'm probably a healthcare entrepreneur. And over the decades that we've worked with Medical Justice, we've probably helped about 11,000 doctors.
Well, we are in a very similar space. I obviously was a practicing dentist for 23 years. And as of this week, when it's being recorded, was my last clinical day. So I am officially not clinical anymore. So it's really good. And, but, obviously I've been helping dentists and other professionals for since 2013 when it comes to their online reviews. So there's a lot of synergy here, but I don't have the legal background which you have. So I'm really excited to discuss.
Oh, wait,
that.
I forgot to say I became a lawyer along the way too.
Yeah.
That is not a non-insignificant detail. So I am a partner in a national health law firm based in Dallas. I live in North Carolina. The partners live in and work in Dallas, and my license is out in California.
If I was, and just out of curiosity, when did you go to law school? When did you finish law school?
I finished in 2008.
And then how old were you then?
So probably early 50s.
Okay. All right.
Let me say, 2008. No, I'm sorry. I was 49.
Okay. And law school's 3. So if I went to, because I've always thought about going to law school to take my stuff to the next level, but I can't imagine going to school at 49 years old and being done at 50 or 52. But I give you a lot of credit.
I did it online, by the way, too.
Oh, you did? Okay.
So
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I give you a lot of credit for that. So let's jump right into the content part of it. And I think the most important thing that I think is really the main thing that people need to hear about is understanding and navigating HIPAA. And that's HIPAA, not like I see people write HIPPA, which I laugh at when I see that. So why don't you give some examples? Why don't you talk about and just so you know, and I know HIPAA is huge. My biggest concern is really teaching people what they can and can't say when they respond to a review, how violating HIPAA can hurt them, which we talked about that case. So that's where I want to focus because HIPAA is so big. Let's focus on that right now. HIPAA when it comes to regards to online reviews.
Yeah. So at its core, and HIPAA means a lot of different things. It was designed to help manage payment, reimbursement, et cetera, and data security. But as it gets implemented in day-to-day practice, it's defined by what can be disclosed, what type of health, and it's called PHI, protected health information, what can be disclosed with or without the patient's authorization. So for the most part, the patient is in the driver's seat. The patient can control what type of information can and will be disclosed. And if you want to disclose any information, it either needs to be codified in statute or you need to have the patient's signed written permission in advance. So there are some things where you don't need the patient's written permission. It's called TPO, treatment, payment, and operation. So for example, if you want to turn in a claim to an insurance company and the patient hasn't signed on the dotted line to do it, and if they haven't told you not to do it, you're free to do that. If you have a beef, let's say the patient has done a chargeback on their credit card, on Visa, MasterCard, Amex, and they say, you know what, I don't like the work you did, and I just want my money back. And so many doctors say, well, how am I supposed to respond to the chargeback? You don't have to worry, at least as it relates to HIPAA, because there's an exception which allows you to do it. So there are some exceptions, but for the most part, there are no exceptions in the review space, meaning that you can't even acknowledge that a particular individual was your patient. So if somebody, and I'll give you the most egregious example, if somebody were to post, Dr. Segal was my doctor. He's a butcher. He mauled my brain and I can't move my right side right now. And if I were to go back, and remember, this person has already acknowledged that he's a patient of mine. But if I come back and say, that's correct, and the reason you ended up having a deficit is because you didn't follow any of my post-op instructions. Well, we can agree, I think, that even though this patient has outed themselves already, because I didn't have the patient's written permission in advance, I have done something that violates HIPAA. Maybe you don't agree with that, but that is the reality of it. So if this patient got mad, they could send a letter to the Office of Civil Rights with Health and Human Services. Those are otherwise known as the HIPAA police. And then I will need to respond to federal authorities to make this right, if I can. So my point is that there really is a fine line in terms of what you can and are able to say on the internet in response to a negative review. And that doesn't mean you can't say anything. There are some things that can be said, and we'll go over some examples of that shortly. But by and large, be very careful about airing dirty laundry on the internet in the mistaken belief that the patient has already outed themselves and that you can just clarify the story. You cannot do that.
So I've always obviously let people know that, acknowledgement is a HIPAA violation. Obviously, when you acknowledge a positive review, I don't think the patients are going to report you to the Office of Civil Rights. But if by the law of the land, it is still a HIPAA violation, acknowledging that they're a patient. So if somebody writes a review, and I'll just give you an example, I went to Dr. Tao and he did an amazing dental implant. I love the result. Thank you so much. If you say something like, thank you so much, we really loved doing your dental implants, you've technically violated the HIPAA there because you've acknowledged you're a patient and you actually said what they had, even though they outed themselves and said they had a dental implant. Versus saying something like, thank you so much for your review. Our office loves doing dental implants. Thank you so much. There's two different types of responses. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, there's a difference because on the one hand, in one of the examples, you are acknowledging that a particular person is your patient. So I would call that a technical breach. Is it likely to rise to something that's actionable? Probably not. But remember, a happy patient today can turn into an unhappy patient tomorrow. And every practice has examples of that. They love me. Now they hate me. Well, what happened? I don't know, but something happened. And, your greatest ally is now your adversary. So one question is, should you spend time responding to positive reviews? So let me move this in a different direction. I think you should mostly respond to negative reviews because the public wants to see how you manage problems. And each problem is going to be different. And you're speaking to the public at large, not so much to the individual patient. And so you are giving substantive information. When you respond to positive reviews, ideally, you're going to have loads of positive reviews. So that means if you are writing something, it's going to look scripted. You're going to be thanking them for the thanks. And I mean, if at the end of the day, you can truly create original, novel content, thanking someone for their thanks, you really should not be a dentist. You should go to Hollywood and be a scriptwriter because that's where your true talent lies. So my point is that I think it gets devalued. If you want to thank someone for the thanks, you can do it old school. Just reach out to them either, through the more private communication channel saying, hey, look, I saw it. Or next time you see them, just say, hey, look, thanks so much for the review. I saw it on there. I just want you to know I noticed it and I appreciate it. But I just think it's exhausting, responding to positive reviews. But back to your very specific question, I think if you're just speaking broadly, which is, we really love putting in implants. That's something that we're good at and we just like doing it. Not a breach. I don't see that as a problem.
Okay. All right. So, obviously one of the biggest things I see in the industry in my space is, dentists reach out to me saying they got a bad review. They don't know what to do. So there's been a wide variety, and I show a ton of examples, as you saw when I gave a seminar, of responding to a review allows the patient to re-respond. It could get worse from that point. Obviously, when you mentioned it, when you're responding to a review, you're really responding to the people that are reading the review, not to the person who wrote the review in most cases. So let's address, when someone gets a bad review, what is your normal recommendation for dealing with it as a whole, rather than any specific type of review? But as a whole, what do you recommend?
Right. First step is read the review. See what it says. It may actually be accurate. If there's a problem that can be solved, solve the problem. You'd be pleasantly surprised that because the bar is set so low sometimes, there are times that you can actually reach out to the patient directly. They'll be pleasantly surprised. The doctor reached out to the patient individually, called them after hours and said, hey, you know what? I saw what you wrote and I actually agree with you. And I want to do something to make it right, whatever that is. Now, let's assume it's just trivial and you can do it. Well, just do it. Then the question is, well, now that you've done it, now what? Some of the magic language that I like after that is saying, look, now that I've solved your problem, I hope you'll be open to a modest request. Will you either remove or update your review? Please remember, this is a request, not a demand. It's a request, not a demand. And human nature being what it is, most people like to reciprocate. You solve the problem. The vast majority of the times, they will come back and honor your very reasonable request. So that's going to be the biggest bucket of all, because most problems can be solved. But let's assume that you can't solve it, that you've reached out to the patient and you've hit a brick wall. Then at that point, you first see, well, is the review so egregious that it can be taken down as a violation of the terms of use? And the answer is maybe. If it's full of profanity and looks like it makes no sense, then I would reach out to the review site and see whether you have to make the case. But certainly we've had a gazillion reviews that we have presented to Yelp and even Google to take down, and they've come down. They've come down because you've made a cogent argument it's a violation of the terms of use. If at that point you've hit a brick wall, then the question is there a way to negotiate with this particular patient? Sometimes it was just a horrible experience and you just want to be done with them, or they've escalated. Then you can negotiate and pay for silence. I hate to say it like that. Sometimes you feel like you have to take a shower after that. It's a very unusual circumstance. But if there's a scorched earth campaign to try and take your practice down and you don't have a buffer of positive reviews to help you weather this storm, you may feel as if, look, I just want this person out of my life. I hate going to work every day now. I know I used to believe that 99% of my patients love me. Now this one patient is occupying 100% of my brain space. I'm done. I need to figure out a solution. There's a way to negotiate quid pro quo. In exchange for me giving you your money back, for example, you take down the review and promise you will never post again. You want to do that with a bulletproof release. We can talk about that later. Then finally, to your original question, what about responding? And the answer is yes. Just respond to the public at large. Be very careful how you do it. I would include language. This will be my first and only response. You don't want to get into a back and forth debate. It's one and done. And here's an example. So if a patient says, Segal operated on me, on my face, I got an infection, and he wanted to charge me 15 grand to fix his mistake. So a good response could be something like, anytime any patient gets a complication, we feel bad about that. We don't want any patient to have an infection, but there are no surgeries that have zero risk. Our infection rate is 1% for this procedure. And nationally it's 3%, so it's below average. Still, anytime any patient gets a complication, they experience it as 0% or 100%. It's a binary outcome. We will stand by our patients and not abandon them. We often do revisions where we waive our professional fee and so on and so forth. My point is, I'm speaking to the public here. I'm not speaking to the patient. And I've done a number of different things here. One is I've marketed that my infection rate is lower than the national average. I went out there and said, we're actually better. I know this patient had an infection, but broadly, most people don't get infections. And in fact, our patients are going to get fewer infections than the person down the hall from me. Number two is that if there's a problem, we'll not abandon you and we'll try and fix it. And the whole notion that I was going to charge them $15,000, which was one of the allegations, was false, because I said many circumstances we will do a revision procedure where we waive our professional fee. So I've done a lot of heavy lifting, but notice in that response have not once disclosed any protected health information. In fact, I'm not even acknowledged that this individual is a patient of mine.
I think the biggest thing is, should I respond to a negative review or not? I think that's a big question for people. Is there any instance when you absolutely would not respond online and not store a war of words and trying to contact the patient first? Would you, if you can't reach the patient, would you always respond online? I'm trying to get, I know it depends on the type of review, but is there any guidance you can give? Other than the fact is, don't sue a patient. There's other means to avoid things, but like, what is the biggest piece of advice you can give someone when it comes to responding to the review? Would it be pause, take a deep breath before you respond? I'm just trying to get some really pertinent information out from people listening to the podcast.
100% of the time, you should pause and take a deep breath. Look, the first thing is to anticipate that at some point you will get a negative review. It's like death and taxes. It's going to happen. And it's like getting a key scratch on your car, on your new car. It's going to happen. Don't freak out when it happens. It is what it is. But you can anticipate that. It is foreseeable. And I think to the extent you have a buffer of positive reviews in advance of this negative review popping up, you've bought yourself time. Because, and actually, here's some good news, that having a 4.8 or 4.9 aggregate score is actually perceived better by the public than having a 5.0. And the reason I say that is because the public, with its experience in all types of service industries, know you can't make everybody happy. Even the Ritz-Carlton has negative reviews on there. That's okay. It means you're mostly positive, and it also means that the material you have up there is not just inauthentic, incredible marketing material. It's authentic. It's credible. So having an occasional review that's negative is not going to be fatal. In fact, this is going to be hard advice to give and even listen to. Maybe you want to send that individual box of chocolate and flowers for having taken you down from 5.0 to 4.9. My point is that it's generally not going to be fatal, but if you can anticipate up front that it will happen, having a buffer of positive reviews buys you time and allows you to take that deep breath and feel good about that. That's
perfect.
The first step.
Perfect. And great. That was great information. We had a brief conversation prior to recording, and I had just referred you a dentist. We're going to keep her anonymous here so we don't out her, but she reached out to me because she was getting some negative reviews left by an employee and friends for, let's say, how should we put it? Decreasing the pay for an employee, basically, demoting them. And this employee went online and was posting stuff. So I referred her to you for some advice. And before we were talking about it, and my initial thing to her, my was to reach out to you, but I also said, you may want to send a cease and desist letter, which is a very common thing you see in the Facebook groups. And that's why I don't always believe what people say. So that happens a lot more than you want to hear, that employees are doing this. So if that happens, generally, what is your recommendation for something like that?
So I try and combine. So cease and desist would be a nasty letter from an attorney saying, if you don't stop doing what you're doing, bad things will happen. Okay. And that can be something to do. But the question is, what if they call your bluff? And so I like to combine the nastiness with some sugar, meaning that I think you can often negotiate a solution that you can live with more easily than to go to war with litigation. Because at the end of the day, I mean, here in this particular example, the ex-employee had co-opted the support of a number of friends and family to engage in a scorched earth campaign. So it is very possible that this individual could lose control of the narrative, meaning that they may not have complete and total control over the other people that are posting nasty reviews. So my thinking is, if you can negotiate a solution with this one individual, you can wrap everything up nicely with a bow. Now, I'm not saying don't send a cease and desist letter, because one of the options here was to have a lawyer write a letter saying, look, things broke down. Let's see if we can get them back on track. You've obviously resigned. We can talk about severance. The severance, whatever it would be, it could be 1 week, it could be 2 weeks, whatever it is. But if you give, you want to get. What I want to get, I want all those reviews coming down, meaning not the ones you posted, not only the ones you posted, but all the ones posted by your friends, family, and neighbors. Those come down too, and a promise in writing never to post again. Now, that would be the give to get. Now, I will throw in the cease and desist. By the way, if we can't come to a negotiated solution here and you continue to post, these are the next steps that are likely to happen. And that could include a lawsuit for defamation. It could be all sorts of nastiness that is out there. But unless you're willing to go to the mat, and I would tell you it's not a great use of resources to open with litigation, because litigation in the realm of defamation will cost a lot of money. It will take a lot of time. It will deliver an uncertain outcome. And the individual may not even have any resources to pay you when all's said and done. None of those check any boxes for me in terms of enthusiasm for litigation.
Gotcha. Well, thank you for answering that. So let's move on to another topic: is patient conflict, de-escalation, and remediation. So what can you lend your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So here's the thing. I mean, and particularly in the dental world, most of your patients are delighted with the type of care they receive. To the extent they're not delighted, it's usually mismanaged expectations. And there's always room for improvement. We can all do better. Every doctor in the country could always do a better job. But if expectations have fallen short, then the question is, can you make it right? And sometimes and it's not just the medical and dental world. It's really any service-based industry. What can be done to make it right? So here's an example. I was eating at a restaurant the other night. I only had 1 hour out with my wife. I had limited time. We had someone staying with my son at home, and I had they had two types of pizza on the menu. It's a high-end restaurant, and I had my eye on one of them. And I ordered it. The server repeated the order, got it right, and then went to the kitchen. And then somebody else brought our food to the table, and it just didn't look right. But again, the clock was ticking, and I was starving, so I ate it. And then my wife recognized this wasn't the pizza I had ordered. So then the server comes back and says, we basically said, look, this wasn't the correct pizza, was it? And she says, well, no, it wasn't. Thanks for noticing and keeping me honest. So then I was a little irritated, but I'd already eaten half of it because I was starving. And I was expecting, look, we'll take it off the bill, or next time you come in, drinks on us, something. But we never really got there. We never got to that point, and then left a bad taste in my mouth. Well, two bad tastes. The first bad taste was the pizza that wasn't what I had ordered. And my point was, there was so little to do to make that right. So much of this you can do so much to give people a wow experience, to shamefully steal from your mantra, how to give people a 5-star experience. Look, the bar is set low in the medical arena and even in the dental arena. I think it doesn't take much to separate yourself from your competitors, but to do so, you really sometimes need to go the extra mile. And my belief is that if you look at your spreadsheet at the end of the year, you won't be net negative if occasionally you deliver extra perks to solve problems. One lesson you can learn is from the Ritz-Carlton. And we heard from the CEO, this was a conference probably a decade ago, and he said that every employee is empowered to spend up to $2,000, no questions asked, to solve a problem. That includes the manager as well as the janitor. And he said, look, don't take advantage of that now that you know that. But I think the thing that's kind of cool is that everybody takes ownership there to deliver a wow experience. And almost nobody needs a $2,000 expenditure to solve a problem. But the point is that they have empowered everyone to do it. And consequently, problems are solved before they get started. I think it's the same thing in the medical and dental arena.
Makes a lot of sense. How about assessing medical and legal risks and solving the challenges around that?
Yeah. So anytime there's a conflict, there are multiple ways that a patient can manifest their unhappiness. They could call you. They could send nasty emails and text messages. They could put up a nasty review. They can file a complaint to the Better Business Bureau. They can file a claim in small claims court. They could send a nasty note to the Board of Dentistry, or they could sue you. And I'm just giving you the laundry list that comes to mind. In 2022, I guess it'll be 23 by the time this comes out, the number of ways that a patient can manifest their unhappiness is near infinite. And so the key is just being proactive. I wouldn't ignore it. So if somebody has a problem in general, I wouldn't ignore it. Number two is that the easiest way to prevent a problem, other than managing expectations, is to make sure that you know who your patients are. While I say the customer is always right, not everyone needs to be your customer. If up front, before you've done any type of work on a patient, they are difficult, demanding, beating up your staff behind the scenes, complaining about the bill before you've even touched them, do you think they're going to be more pleasant after you've cut on them? The answer is uniformly no. The other thing to pay attention to, and I don't know how often you see this in the dental world, but you certainly see it in the aesthetic elective pay space, is that the incidence of mental health disorders is higher than average. And meaning that it's not zero, and that if you don't pay attention to it up front, you end up solving the problem that you think is in front of you. But the deeper problem is that there is a substantive and significant mental health challenge. And if that is not addressed up front, you may end up trying to solve, the only toolkit you have is dental tools. But if somebody has a problem with mental health, there's nothing, and particularly if you're looking at cosmetic dentistry, there's nothing that you can do that will make that individual happy. They need something else. And I think being able to get trained to recognize that is imperative in modern day.
Is there any other topics that you wanted to cover that we didn't cover?
Yeah, the universe is so large in terms of conflict. I do think that being in healthcare is a blessing. I think we're all lucky to be able to participate in it. I think it can also be demanding. And if you get consumed by any type of conflict, be it conflict with employees, with patients, with the regulatory bodies, it will change how you view the practice. And so I think being compliant with all sorts of the regulations up front, understanding what you can and cannot do, and delivering 5-star service, you are mostly on the road to preventing a problem. And when you do get that inevitable problem, you should rely upon seasoned professionals, seasoned veterans that have seen these problems before. Be careful about trying to wing it. It's just not a great use of your resources. Most of the money that you make is spent actually taking care of patients. And if you get consumed by a speed bump in the road and you don't handle it properly, you could end up spending a gazillion dollars trying to make it right.
Gotcha. And one last question for me is, if you had to list a couple of like the do not do in the review space, what would you say some of those are?
The easiest one is don't get into an open-ended debate releasing protected health information online. That's a hard one to recover from. And number two is that you will encourage a cyber mob. And I don't know if anybody remembers a now deceased lion called Cecil out in Africa.
Walter Palmer.
This is a cyber. Yeah. So anyway, it may have been even been a dentist. That
He was
went
a
out.
dentist.
It was a dentist. So
Yeah.
the dentist goes out to Africa and then is hunting. It is what it is. And he ends up taking down a lion that had a name. The name was Cecil. And apparently Cecil was a hero. I don't know how or why it was a hero and how and why the dentist didn't know it. But this dentist became known as the one who took down Cecil the lion. So my larger point is that if you're going to go hunting, please do not kill anything that has a name like Cecil.
That's awesome. That's awesome. All right. Well, that was great. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise. As I mentioned, I have a little lightning round Q&A. It's a product called the Poddex. It's on my iPhone. I'm going to read you some questions. They're all business related. And just answer as quickly as you can. No thought needed.
There are no wrong answers.
No wrong
here,
answers. Correct.
Okay, good.
So first off, which three adjectives describe your strengths?
Confident, risk taker, and collegial.
Okay. What about the future are you most excited about?
I think we're living in a golden age. I can't think of any other time or place I'd rather be, even though right now it seems amazingly scary.
What's your approach to marketing?
You have to get out the word of who you are and what you do. And the best way to do that is with your clients, customers, those who have used your services, the words of others as opposed to your words. If you just use your words, it's as if your mother gave you a testimonial.
That's exactly right. Have you ever turned down a client?
Yes, I have. And I've never regretted the client that I've turned down. No, and I eat my own dog food. I tell people that there have been times I've refunded clients money when I thought it was in my personal interest to move on, that I didn't want to get consumed in an open-ended conflict. It's something that I probably wouldn't have done 20 years ago. But yes, I think that as you get older, you get wiser, you don't feel bummed out about having told someone you can't help them.
Perfect. What book should you go back and reread as it's made a great impact on you the first time you read it?
There's a book called The 48 Laws of Power by Green, Greene. And it is an amazingly good book. It takes a long time to read. There are 48 laws, many of which contradict each other. And you can read them one chapter at a time. It often comes with The Art of War as dual volumes, but I think interesting lessons in human nature.
Perfect. If you had a chance to start your career over again, what would you have done differently?
Interesting. So I started off as a liberal arts major with a math minor and someone without direction, and then fell into healthcare. I think it took me a while to figure out that I am at heart an entrepreneur, and I might have gotten into the entrepreneurial world sooner rather than later.
This is funny you just mentioned that. Do you believe there is some sort of pattern or formula to becoming a successful entrepreneur? That's funny you mentioned that.
Entrepreneurialism is not for most people. It's not for everyone. I think the reason I say that is because most people are risk averse. So first step is you need to be able to tolerate calculated risk. You need to be willing to fail as long as they're not fatal failures. There really is no total downside to a failure as long as you've been educated and don't make the same mistake twice. So I do think that those are the key components to entrepreneurialism. You want to be your own boss. You want to work for yourself. You believe in innovation. You think there's a better way to get something done. And you believe that you would suffocate in a large, stale corporate environment.
All right, two more questions. This is a tough one. If you had a chance to open up a lemonade stand tomorrow, what would you call your stand?
Let's see. It's not brain surgery.
It's not brain surgery. Okay. If you achieved...
I say that as a former neurosurgeon.
Yes, I got that. If you achieved all of your life goals tomorrow, what would you do next?
I would continue doing some type of work and innovation. I think there are many people who fantasize about what true retirement is like, meaning that they're working to a particular goal, and then when they hit that goal, they'll just lay back on a beach and do nothing. I think for somebody like me, I would wither away and die. So I'm destined to continue to being active, engaged, and avoid becoming intellectually stale.
That's perfect. So Jeff, this was awesome. You're an expert in your space. For if people want to reach out to you for advice, they have a bad review and they need to decide how to deal with it or make some get some legal advice on it, what's the best way for someone to reach out to you?
Okay, so our website is medicaljustice.com, one word, medicaljustice.com. And my email is jsegal, that's J-S as in Sam, E-G-A-L, at medicaljustice.com. Easy peasy.
Perfect. This was awesome. Guys, if you have listened to the podcast, I know you then know that I'm in the review space. People reach out to me all the time. Know that I recommend Jeff for the service that he provides. Obviously, I'm not an attorney. I can't make those suggestions or I can't give advice on how to legally deal with a bad review. He would be the person to reach out to. So he's got my 2 thumbs up. Please reach out to me if you have any questions. Jeff, again, you were awesome. Thank you so much. So for those that did listen to the podcast, please share it. Please let everybody know if you enjoyed this episode. This should be one of the most popular episodes I've done in a very long time. I want to again thank the sponsors, Dental Intelligence and the doc sites, as well as reminding you that you have interest in learning more about the event I'm putting on in Delray Beach in September 2023. Please go to superchargerdentalpractice.com and sign up for that event. I think you'll love it. There's more information on that site. You can find out more about it. Or if you want to contact me directly, it's Len at drlentau.com. That's drlentau.com. Jeff, thank you so much for being here with me today. And we'll talk to everyone soon. Thanks again, Jeff.
I loved it. Thanks so much.
Thank you.